Welcome to Slice of PI, where we make quick hot takes on the news whenever we feel like it. I'm your host, Matt, as usual, and with me is the director of Sambayan 2. This time it's personal, Borge.
That is. Are we planning a
But,
trilogy for this one?
mm,
Okay. PI
Sambayan.
nyo, PI nating lahat, board here at your service.
Yes, and if you couldn't tell by that intro, we are actually talking about a very hot topic right now, which is the 1Sambayan coalition that emerged recently, very recently.
Mm.
And so, of course, 1Sambayan is trying to propose a new opposition, to unite an opposition against the Duterte regime. And eventually, it came from all sorts of sectors, from
Mm.
former Chief Justice Carpio to even Brother Armin Luistro from the Lasallian Order, and Albert Del Rosario, former DFA secretary. So,
Yeah.
yeah, all sorts of characters from different regimes and different times. And of course, it caught people's attention. And just recently, in January 12, they had a major ceremony where they revealed who they're considering to be their candidates. People like the usual, like Lenny Robredo, sometimes Grace Poe. Well, a few lesser known opposition heads, like even
Surprising.
uh surprising. There's Vilma Santos, former governor of
Mm.
Batangas and actress, and even Isko Moreno, who just won his bid as mayor, but maybe might go for higher office. So it's a weird mix. But the thing is, the problem with that is, despite choosing them and declaring them as possible candidates, none of them really took the bait, so to speak. None of them really accepted. So, and it's quite early because right now it is over a year, at least over a year, or just under a year till the next elections. So, I don't know. What do you think?
Mm.
Uh, what do you think? Monsambayan missed when they did that ceremony last Independence Day.
Well, that one. Well, well, first and foremost, they missed the marketing and the planning. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you don't nominate people who will not accept. That's basic political marketing for you.
Uh huh.
You just don't do that unless you want to
Right.
be humiliated. And
Which they did. They were.
and they were
Mm-hmm.
humiliated to an extent. But then again,
Right.
opposition people would double down on such matters.
Mm-hmm.
But out of that one, you now have the emerging Robredo Trillanes tandem.
Mm. That was
So
weird.
but
Yeah.
yeah, that was weird to an extent. So One Sambayan is trying to separate itself from the Liberal Party, which again is already burdened by so much baggage that
Mm-hmm.
it is more of a
Possibly a
liability.
dead horse at this point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not dead horse you can leave behind, but the LP is more of a liability if you get its support at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to be independent, and I think they do have the opportunity to be independent. I mean, the members of the One Sambayan, the conveners of One Sambayan, came from relatively independent sectors. You have someone from the judiciary, you have someone from the education sector. So yeah, they're relatively independent. But again, by nominating Lenny Robredo, Lenny Robredo being, of course, one of the flag bearers of LP, I think they missed that opportunity to be actually independent, to provide an alternative to the to the old dichotomy of LP versus everyone else. So yeah, so I think they missed that opportunity to be perceived as authentically independent.
So what's wrong with picking Lenny? And if ever, no, what would have guaranteed them to be a more genuine opposition? Or yeah, or independent, despite them like as you said, being independent.
Yeah, well, first there's a range of people who can be perceived as relatively independent. They should have stuck with those instead of trying to pin their hopes on someone who's readily identified with the LP. That's one thing.
Liberal Party.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, but here's the interesting thing. I mean, one thing that is clear that they're trying to do is to draw the battle lines,
Mm.
define the battleground. And I think at this point, it is an interesting strategy at this early in the game, so that
Mm.
there's people can start rallying. The
Mm.
problem is they aren't. So why do you think they didn't? I mean, regardless of whether they chose Lenny or
Mm.
not, she did not. accept? Why do you think they don't accept at this early in the game?
Why aren't people rallying? Well, the old opposition is rallying. That's one thing. On the
Mhm.
other hand, I think Duterte still enjoys support. Okay,
Mhm.
so we cannot expect Duterte supporters to simply switch to the opposition.
Mm.
Those who are not keen on being identified with the LP, I think the question is, why are they reluctant to be identified with 1Sambayan? And
Mhm.
I think some commentators have expressed their opinion. They said that, again, the failure of 1Sambayan is that they're playing the moral card and they're playing
Mm.
it badly.
Uh-huh.
So they would usually blame that one.
Yeah. And it's funny when you say moral card, and they've done this before several times,
Mm,
especially in 2019
mm,
through the Ocho Derecho, where they posture themselves as decent people compared to
mm,
Duterte. They never killed people. They follow
mm,
through on their word,
mm,
unlike Duterte. You know, they talk to the people, unlike
mm,
Duterte. And the problem is when you do that, you also alienate a section who still like him, who still support him,
mm.
and saying that if you do not follow us,
Mm.
that means you're bad people.
Yeah.
That's what backfired for Hillary Clinton when he called the
Mm,
supporters a basket of deplorables. So,
mm,
and clearly, I think a lot of the critics right now, they don't like
mm,
the moral politics game, you know.
mm,
But the problem is, I think that's inevitable because
mm,
what this pandemic has shown us is that like most people say it's about systems, it's about it doesn't really matter about the actor, but right now it is clear that leadership matters, especially in a time of
mm,
pandemic. A lot of this
mm,
depended on the decisions made by the leader. Make the
mm,
wrong one, we it affects everyone, and everything comes tumbling down. And I
mm,
think it is clear that it is important that we choose the right leaders more than
mm,
ever. Yeah, of course, I sided with you in saying that elections aren't everything, but right
mm.
now, especially in time of pandemic, it might not be everything, but it is hella important in
Yeah.
times of emergencies.
Yeah.
So, if ever, since we are both critical of this moral posturing, how should we act and
Mm.
move forward towards the elections?
Yeah.
It's not like
That's.
Sambayanan,
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
Sambayan. Yeah.
Yeah. Regarding that one, we go back to the issue of moral politics, and if we are to place emphasis on the role of leadership, moral
Mhm.
politics is an inevitable dimension in Philippine politics. Uh,
Mhm.
the ideal, the Weberian ideal of a bureaucratic entity taking
Mm.
over is just it's too far from the sentiments of most Filipinos. And
Right.
going back to the moral politics of 1Sambayan, I think what they miss is that it's not about them playing the moral card. It's about them not playing it right. Meaning
And how do they do that?
they're not appealing to a set of moral values that are widely shared.
Mm.
Okay, so as far as
Mm.
we have discussed this over and over again, Filipinos are illiberal.
Mm.
Filipinos are illiberal. They don't appeal to that one. Filipinos are
Mhm.
leader centric. They don't appeal to that one. They try to posture themselves as policy oriented entities.
Mhm.
Filipinos like indecency and they posit
Mhm.
themselves as decent people. So it's never about moral politics versus practical politics. It's
Mm.
about playing the moral politics right. Okay.
Mm.
And even Filipinos, we are proud to call ourselves as practical and realistic people.
Mhm.
And even that is a moral value. So
Mhm.
if we are to move forward, we need to recognize that moral politics is unavoidable. It's just a matter of
Mm.
appealing to the right
Set of
morals.
morals.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
widely shared morals. Not
Mm.
specifically right share, because that's what one Sambayan did. They tried to appeal
Mhm.
to the right sense of set of morals,
Right.
regardless of what other people think.
Yeah.
Now regarding agency, yeah, we do agree with this one. At this point, leadership is important. The
Mhm.
leadership is important. It's also a reminder that structures, institutions are run by people. Okay,
Mm.
are run by people. So if we are to move
Right.
forward, we need to find someone whose behavior, attitudes, and values can actually lead to effective leadership.
Mm.
So it's the
Mhm.
return of political ethics. Put it simply,
Mm.
this is the time to
Right.
this is the time to place political ethics at the forefront of
Mm.
discussion.
Right. This reminds me, of course, what I said in our Q&A, one of our earlier episodes, I think.
Mm,
And it needs, well, in a way, we need someone outside the system. In this case, what we can call a maverick, who
mm,
is independent, not in the current battle lines and who was
mm,
able to make decisions based on, some people would say conscience, but basically a third way candidate.
mm,
And in the same way, this is someone who is similar to Duterte, who also played Maverick politics right. Duterte won because he played moral politics right. And like what you said, he
mm,
appealed to the set of morals of the majority. Now,
mm,
of course, well, the next question, I suppose, is um, number one, like, who do like? Well, it's a bit early to say, but who can possibly be an alternative to Duterte now that, especially right now, his regime and his faction is
mm,
fielding people like Sara Duterte, or
mm,
even well, who knows who else? Maybe even a comeback of Bongbong Marcos.
mm,
But yeah, so they have that faction. So if ever we want to beat Duterte, who
mm,
do we, who do you, who's a good example of who might be able to beat Duterte, or will Duterte
mm.
just win? And we have to live with
Uh,
that. I don't know.
as far as I'm concerned, that someone will come from Duterte's camp,
Mm,
first and foremost.
okay.
That someone will come from Duterte's camp.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, Maverick politics. If we go to Maverick politics, this is the legacy to an extent of
Mm-hmm.
Duterte's regime. They again, the trend didn't start with Duterte. The trend started with Grace Poe. Grace Poe winning top
Mm,
one, I think,
right.
senatorial race, even if she is independent. So that started
Mm,
the trend, and the peak would be Duterte's victory as this
mm-hmm.
great maverick. So Maverick politics, this is the new rule of Philippine politics at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So Mavericks they don't come from nowhere, first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
They usually come from the moderate factions of an incumbent.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of other Mavericks like
Mm-hmm.
that. Well, Deng Xiaoping in China can be considered as a Maverick.
Okay.
He came from
Mm-hmm.
the more moderate faction of Maoists,
Mm,
specifically the faction of Zhou Enlai. One thing.
mm-hmm.
Other moderates, Mavericks. Okay. Let me think of. Well, Trump would be one Maverick.
He's
he
definitely
can,
he wasn't exactly extremist. As much as the media would claim to be an
yeah,
extremist, he's actually very moderate. He used to
yeah.
be a New York Democrat, and then he moved to the Republicans. So yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
Uh, mhm. So basically, I think a maverick politician would be good. Number one, because Filipinos love novelty.
Hmm,
And if you notice the pattern of presidential elections in particular, they usually vote for the opposite of the previous and incumbent.
hmm,
So there hasn't exactly been a smooth transition of power from the same
hmm,
faction. Not since the, well, post EDSA regime. At the very least, we can proudly say.
hmm,
First you have Cory,
hmm.
and then Ramos, who's very different, and then Ramos to Estrada,
Who is very different.
very different. And from Estrada Arroyo, and then Arroyo to Noy Noy, and Noy Noy
Hmm,
to Duterte. So it's very,
hmm,
very different individuals. We can go through
hmm,
one by one. So I suppose history would be on the side to be with someone who is different from Duterte,
hmm,
despite his strong following. So but that person should be decisive as
hmm,
of now, because Sambayan, one way to prove it's a maverick is that if one of those politicians did say yes as
hmm,
early as now, despite breaking convention, and that's what a
hmm,
maverick is.
hmm,
They break conventional wisdom,
hmm,
and if they're able to walk through where that continue to break that
hmm,
convention and still remain safe, then
hmm,
they're on to win it. That would have been a
hmm.
good opportunity.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that did not happen,
Hmm,
and too many people have been afraid to say that it's too early. And I
hmm,
think conventional wisdom would say if you declare your intentions too soon, you'd end up like Binay and attacked so early to give them people
hmm,
time to assassinate you early,
hmm,
whether literally or morally.
hmm. But
Moral assassination.
I'll add one more
Mm,
thing as regarding
sure.
Maverick politician. It's not only about at this point. At this point, it's
Mm-hmm.
not only about being different to Duterte. The
Mm-hmm.
challenge for a Maverick politician right now is to be different from the old opposition. And sadly,
Mm,
1Sambayan is now associated with the old opposition.
mm,
So it's a Maverick politician that can win the 2022 election would be someone who
mm-hmm.
will be different from Duterte and different from the old opposition.
Possibly, I think you and I considered this, especially in our guesting at the White
Mm,
Stripe podcast. They
mm,
asked who would probably win
mm.
Futures forecast, and both of us, to my surprise, actually, said Manny Pacquiao. So do you think Manny Pacquiao could be a potential maverick?
He can. I think he's
Mhm.
already being positioned as such. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
it's a conspiracy or by natural causes. He's really being
Mm-hmm.
positioned as someone who's different from Duterte. And
Mm-hmm.
he is different from, of course, the liberal sectors of our society because he's a conservative. He's a
Right.
cultural conservative. He's a traditionalist.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's he can be that maverick.
Right.
There are other
Mm-hmm.
mavericks out there, but
Mm-hmm.
they I don't think they would try to run. Nancy Beanie would also
No,
be one. Nancy Beanie would also be
yeah.
one, but I don't think she will run. I don't think she will run.
No, not quite yet.
Mm.
She's not as popular yet.
Isko Moreno,
Eh,
they're positing him as to an extent a maverick.
yes, but they're still not. They still didn't take the bait of 1Sambayan.
Yeah.
So yeah, is there any hope for 1Sambayan, or is this maverick that we're speaking of? Do they have a chance with 1Sambayan, or should they just go at it alone?
I would
So
say this one from a Hegelian perspective.
whoa, okay,
One Sambayan had served its purpose to be the antithesis.
yeah,
The maverick will step over one Sambayan.
mm.
That's
Ooh.
I think that's historical role, just to be a acid test.
Right. One thing that I did appreciate with 1Sambayan is this. At least to a lot of people, it got us talking about
Mm.
certain individuals that we didn't consider, like
Yeah,
number
yeah, yeah.
one, Vilma Santos.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of people consider Vilma Santos as a very capable leader in her own right.
Mm.
And not only is she popular, like
Mm.
as a former movie star,
Mm.
but she's also an effective leader
Local government.
as a governess. Yeah. Or even like the return of Gibo, who
Mm.
ran on like in 2010, maybe, who knows? Or Trillanes. Well,
Mm.
it might be his time. Who knows?
Mm.
We might
No,
know.
but
I think,
I would like
yeah.
I would like Vilma Santos to win the 2022 election so that
Mm.
she can she can establish a tradition of Filipinos
Mm-hmm.
voting for local government leaders instead of senators.
Mm.
I would like
Ah.
that's one contribution that Duterte provided Philippine politics is this to allow
Mm.
local government leaders to be president because again for the
Mm-hmm.
longest time the Senate is the platform to be a president and I think that is
Mm-hmm.
to an extent inappropriate because the
Mm-hmm.
president is an executive office and you should have an
Yes.
executive there.
Mm-hmm.
So we can excuse the likes of Joseph Estrada because again Erap served as mayor of San Juan for the longest time, so he
Mm-hmm.
knows local government. So he won.
Yeah.
So, but Duterte would be the first one to jump
Yeah.
from local government to the presidency. And I would
Uh-huh.
like Vilma Santos to have that, to establish that tradition, really, to have a
Yeah.
go, or even Remulla to an extent if he runs and wins.
Or again, Mayor Isko.
Yeah.
Who's now Andres Bonifacio right now,
Yeah.
and Eric Mati film. Oh my gosh.
But
So, yeah.
that's a tradition in the United States to an extent.
Mhm.
Governors of large
Well,
states become president.
governors of large states. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So yeah, I suppose at least we have this. I think we at least have a list of names that we can think about, and I think that's for me. That's the purpose. It began posing the question: who can be a new president? Who knows? At least it gave names to toss around with, and it opened up the conversation. More than that, I think I'd agree with you there that there's not a lot of gas in that tank.
Yeah.
But who knows? In fact, I suppose let this be a beacon to whichever maverick out there intends to be president for the sake of our country, please, and we will support you and try to break and cut through the conventions of Philippine politics right now. Because in a way, some conventions in a way created Duterte, but he also cut some. So if we can cut more through that, then maybe we might have a better chance at 2022.
Yeah, let's see if we still have enough experimental energy among Filipino voters. We don't have that much. We don't have that much experimental energy among Filipino voters. We spent so much with Duterte. I don't know.
But at this point, do we have a choice? Either we go for another Maverick or someone so clean, safe, and traditional, and back to normal that maybe it might be that might be another choice. A super hyper return to the pre-Duterte age. So, hey, who knows? I know Chris Aquino, or I don't know.
Si Bimbi puta. And that would
Bimbi.
that would be a regression at this point to go back
to what.
To be honest, that would be a regression to go back to how things were. Anyway,
but that is an option. That might be.
Yeah.
Maybe even Maros if we take it back. I don't know. Who
knows? Oh God. Maglalagay na naman siya ng kanin sa mug.
I think for now, look for mavericks, or maybe, who knows, someone out there, be a maverick.
Mm.
A maverick is someone who doesn't, who defies conventions. Iba naman, mas
Mm.
bago pa.
Yeah.
Mas bago kay Duterte. Na kaya talun si Duterte, di ba? O
Mm.
si Sara Duterte. So, kung saan man kayo, tulungan nyo kami. Kayo lang ang pag-asa.
But sadly,
Nagtagalog sa...
but sadly, you should look like Duterte to an extent. Not physically, of
Nah,
course. Not physically, of course, but politically, you must look like Duterte. You must resemble Duterte. That's the tragedy of
like
being a maverick.
former mayor. What else?
The
Former
values, the aura itself, the
mayor. Sound
marketing.
like a Duterte, to be able to
Yeah.
curse like Duterte.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I mean, chances are, of course, 1Sambayan gave us names, but who knows? It might be someone we haven't considered yet. And Duterte emerged very late.
Yeah.
Before it was between Binay, Poe, and Rojas.
Mar,
And then all of a sudden, poof. Yeah.
Si Eddie Hill lang pala
Duterte.
po. Si Eddie Hill. Si Eddie Hill.
Eddie Hill. I don't know, who knows? Or Freddie Webb. Freddie Webb. or I don't know. There's another one called Brother Eddie Villanueva.
Also, yeah. 1Sambayan also recommended. God. He ran for president once, right? Yeah, he did.
I suppose that just added the flavor of being diverse. They're not just for progressives, but also somewhat moderately conservative. So I don't know. I think that's an interesting thought experiment. But since they already declined, or what if they belatedly accept? Then maybe that might resurrect 1Sambayan. But otherwise, I suppose the future needs to be new.
Yeah, the future is always new.
Yeah,
it's a matter of how new it is.
So if we're going to choose another maverick to beat Duterte, how do we make sure that maverick might not have the same problems as Duterte? We might end up choosing another shade of Duterte. What do you think? What kind of maverick should we choose?
I think the crucial thing would be the notion of independence and autonomy.
Because that's the thing. Duterte may have been a maverick, but he was not quite as independent as we thought.
Yeah.
Sometimes you judge even a maverick not only in the elections, but even after elections. So I suppose I think the real judge of a candidate was once they're elected, what do they do? And he suddenly turned towards China, all of a sudden. So I think I suppose our advice only applies to electing them, but how they rule would be different. And at least, if ever we choose a maverick, it has to be a maverick that at the very least shows him or herself capable of listening to their constituents. I mean, I think that's the difference between Duterte and any other politician, or even mavericks. He doesn't listen to anyone except himself or people who are sycophants.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I think it can also be a matter of electoral politics. But at this point, if we want to elect a maverick, we must take a look at the people surrounding him. That is what most Filipinos did not do for Duterte's case.
Which is why Manny Pacquiao would still be a viable option. I mean, he's popular enough, but if you get the right people behind him, he could be great. He had a great speechwriter, by the way, in his Oxford address. He was in Oxford. Wow. But he clearly read a speech that was written for him to make him sound worthy of Oxford.
Anyway,
an Oxford audience.
But I think we need to keep an eye on those surrounding them. We missed that with Duterte's case. The signs were already there. He received money from the Taipans. So that's already an indication that he's receiving Chinese money, yet we didn't pay much attention to it. So I think for this time, we must pay attention to the people surrounding them.
And how he treats the constituents. Sometimes he says, even although he engages his critics, does he really listen to them? So no. I think we must observe who surrounds him and how he treats the constituents, regardless of they support or they are critical of them. And I think that's the balance we must observe. And we have to remain vigilant. Just because they won doesn't mean things will be fine and dandy. You have to make sure that they do the right things at the beginning of their term. All right, so that is a hearty slice. I hope you like that. Our contribution to the elections discussion, and hopefully you'll help us continue the discussion, perhaps through the emails or comment in our page. But until the next slice,
Magandang gabi, mga kabiyay.